I feel like you guys are not going to be with me on my opinion about railroading, which is that a little bit of railroading in D&D is fine, actually. And so I am preempting the video that I just made with this one, where I expand on my opinion a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about why I feel like a little bit of railroading is fine, actually, and about how if you're having problems with your players bucking against you trying to get them to interact with your story, it's actually a problem with your story and not a problem with the fact that you're trying to get them to interact with it. Now, I want to preface this prefacing by saying this is not universal advice. I am very specifically talking DM to DM about D&D. I think this is a problem kind of specific to D&D. I don't engage with a ton of other titterpigs, but the ones that I do are way more collaborative in nature from jump. D&D is kind of uniquely crunchy mechanically and puts a unique level of creative burden on the GM, I think. So in spite of a lot of videos that you will see on TikTok, on D&D TikTok, most games of D&D do involve an interchange between open world elements, exploration that are driven by player action, and railroading, which is driven by DM action. Most players not only want but need some amount of railroading to have a good play experience, they need to know from the DM and have guidance about what their options are for how to interact with the story and the world. Railroading has a whole host of in-game uses, not the least of which is managing pacing of sessions and of the story at large, and making players feel like they have some amount of forward momentum, like they know what they're meant to be doing, where they're meant to be going, and like they're not just meandering around aimlessly, which happens a lot in open world games that are really, really light on any DM implemented structure. There definitely is a way to be way too heavy-handed with it in a way that just completely overrules all player agency, and forces them to do stuff at times when they're like not ready or willing to do it. I think that's kind of a separate issue. But when I see DMs talking about problems with guiding players, a lot of the time they're talking about situations where they're trying to get their players to engage with the story in ways that it doesn't seem like their players should be resistant to, and their players are resistant to it. And I want to tell you, that is not a railroading problem. That is a story problem. Now, there can be a lot of reasons for this, right? Player reluctance to engage in the narrative. But when I have talked to DMs about this, almost uniformly, when they are complaining about the fact that their players will not take the story hooks that they're throwing out, will not interact with the main core plot of their campaign, and are constantly off doing side quests, when I ask them, when did you start to involve your players in creating the story of the campaign? If the answer is not never, it's recently. Just to be clear, you should start involving your players in story creation in session 0. Like, as soon as possible. As soon as you are creating the campaign, that's when you should be starting to talk to players about what they want to do in it. As a DM, if you are having consistent problems engaging your players in the story, a lot of the time it's because you haven't made them integral to it. The story doesn't really matter to them, and they don't really matter to the story. If your story could be told about other people, you should be telling it about those people, right? You shouldn't be telling it about these characters because they're not vital to it happening. I would even say this for running a module. Even if you are running a pre-written adventure, you should be adapting it to the players and the characters that you have, to make it personal to them, to make them integral to this version of the story. At the very earliest stages of planning a campaign, you should be working cooperatively with your players to design a story that you can both have fun playing through. You can have fun setting them up, and they can have fun executing on it. You should not be able to tell the story without their involvement. And if you try, this is a problem that you will run into. I will also say, DMs, you have got to stop being so subtle and stingy about plot stuff. You can't pussyfoot around it. This is not a pre-scripted thing. you don't get to just hide the story from them and still have them engage in it. You know what I mean? If players are trying to interact with your story, you need to open the fucking door. Give them information as freely as you possibly can. If they show an interest in something, you should be able to tell them something about it. If they are engaging in certain parts of your story, you should be giving to them very freely from that part of the story. I don't get keeping secrets from your players that actively keep them from engaging. Like, I really don't. If you build stories with your players, if you design your campaign with their characters specifically in mind, if you build a story that their specific characters have to be a part of in order to, like, make it happen, they will willingly engage in it. If you factor in not just your tastes about storytelling, but also their tastes, if you, like, really think through what your friends will enjoy doing and what story you will enjoy telling, and you marry those two things, you will not be having this problem with people refusing to engage with your story. Because it will also be their story. Like, I don't know how else to say this. If you have created a story that you could tell entirely without your players' involvement, you have written a novel. You have not written a campaign. And it is not your player's fault for not wanting to engage in that. Railroading is not the problem.